A lot of people come to the church on Tuesdays and Thursdays through our Pathways program. And these are folks who are experiencing some type of hardship in their life. Potentially they're food or housing insecure. Maybe they have just kind of fallen on tough times, and or they've come to the program for a long time and maybe they're in a different place, but they want to come find that sense of community. Because we offer, on one hand, really direct services. Food, to-go meals, a place to come and warm yourself if it's cold outside. What makes these programs really special for me personally is that we really want to create, in addition to these direct services, we want to create a sense of belonging. And I think that's what's a little bit special about this type of program, is that we have folks who, really dedicated volunteers who show up every Tuesday, Thursday, and they serve coffee. And it's as much about the actual serving the coffee as it is a conversation. So folks will come, and I've actually heard the feedback. I love coming here mostly because you guys are friendly, you want me to be here, you know my name, and I feel like I belong. So that's really what we're looking for. I think that's kind of the secret sauce. And it just feels much more like a community that way. We have people who have come here for 15 to 20 years, and some of them started off on the street, and then they've transitioned into a house, a home, an apartment, and they still come back, sometimes just to share how they're doing, other times actually to be a volunteer themselves. And yet it's not really an us-them mentality. I think it's much more like we're all in this thing of life together, and we show up, we have our personhood bear on one another in conversation, and we're able to have a real exchange of life. And oftentimes they come from massively different backgrounds, and that to me is kind of this, kind of harkening back to this piece. I think it's just vibrant, and it can be piercing, it can be really strong, it can be really big disagreements. There can be a massive disparity, but I do think the practice of showing up and being present to people, whether you're a volunteer, whether you're a client, or whether you're someone who is just coming as a friend, I think that's really what makes it work, so to speak. I think that's what makes it not just an us-them different mentality. It's like we're truly showing up for one another in a sense of we all have some skin in the game and we want to care for each other.
Do you feel like your understanding of creativity and being open to people and listening and all of that affects how effective you are in ministering to them?
That's a great question. I think that part of my desire when I meet someone on the street, for instance, or at our program or coming through our church, is to really slow down and to attempt to really hear where someone's coming from. One of the things that I love about our community ministries program, and Pathways in particular, is that most folks who come through our doors are very honest. They're very real. They're authentic, and they are discerning. And so if I am putting on a show, for instance, or just saying something like a platitude, they'll sniff that out and they'll call it out. And so it keeps me on my toes just to be real with them, and in turn to be treated with respect. And it goes both ways. So I think in one way, listening and showing up for folks outside has put myself in check. Am I really showing up? How am I showing up with them and myself? And it makes me to slow down and to really pay attention, and to have a moment of just kind of checking in. It might be like a self-awareness exercise, like I'm going to take a few moments before I go outside and see how am I showing up to these conversations? Am I tired? Am I irritable? Am I anxious about something? And it kind of allows me to kind of put that to the side and really focus on, with intention, on the task at hand. And I do think in my own creative process, I'm looking for honest moments of kind of traction, of what really sticks, what's really lighting me up. And that's, like, I'm a passionate person. I want to do things that I really care about. And I find when I have a conversation outside, I get to listen to maybe the hardest day that someone has been through in a long time. Maybe they've lost someone that they love. And I get to come alongside that person and be very present, and that's meaningful to me. That's why I got into this work to begin with, as a pastor, as a priest, is to be in people's significant moments of their life. In when kids are born, when people die, when people are married, or when folks want to get baptized, when there's a tragedy or a celebration. Like, those moments of a punctuated life, those are meaningful to me, and they are beautiful moments I get to share with people, and that to me is a gift. And I think in my art, what I'd like to do is be able to kind of visually represent significant things to me. And in that, I have to slow down and pay attention and see what's coming up in me right now. What am I really wanting to focus on? What are moments that have been defining for me? What are things that are catching my attention? Where are moments that I want to push into? And how can I, after having listened to myself, checked in, maybe internally, processing an idea with a friend, how can I reimagine that visually? How can I kind of recreate that in a way, maybe it's a little bit new, or maybe it's a chance of remembering. That's kind of a theme that will come up for me from time to time, is wanting to remember specific moments, or rethink something that has been meaningful to me. I do think the listening process has taught me to slow myself down, to really find meaningful moments, and to pay attention. And I think in my own individual creative process, it's very introverted in a sense. Like, I really don't share that with a lot of people, whereas my life as a priest is very public. They've always felt quite divergent to me. And so I'm trying to find ways of bringing them together. In fact, this conversation has helped me to try and really think through that.
This piece of art installation too, I think it is a great way to integrate, to reconcile the different parts that you live. That's awesome. This drawing that you have of the hands, what inspired it?
So yeah, it's actually a watercolor. It started off as a simple sketch, and then it's got probably 5 or 6 different layers of watercolor on it over time. And just kind of, instead of a subtractive process, this is very much an additive process. And so I would do the highlights first and make sure all those kind of lined up. And then I would really try to bring in some darker areas of color focus that really brings in this contrast that helps it to become a little more kind of pop off the page. So that was a fun, its own kind of process altogether. But the inspiration for it is I started to do a study. I really think about, as a priest, I use my hands a lot up at the altar when we're celebrating the Eucharist. And for me, there was this motion of taking the host when we consecrate it in the actual celebration of the Eucharist. And there was this moment of kind of this offering where I'm kind of standing and offering this for God to be made present. And I'm just a vehicle through which that is a participation. But I think there was this moment of just, what does it mean to be able to hold something up that God blesses, that God comes and embodies. And so for me, that it started this kind of a drawing on hands. Some of it was very literal, of hands holding a host. Some of it was of hands breaking open, maybe a piece of bread or maybe like a piece of fruit with things coming out in this type of like generative way. And I started to think about different communities that had been marginalized, who weren't able to maybe encounter this in the same way. I thought about, for instance, elderly folks, people who are on in years, who often feel excluded from communities and don't really get to encounter this kind of embodied sense of hope in the same way. Maybe they're finding themselves at the end of their life and they're trying to make sense of where they've been, or quite literally, I thought of my grandmother, who is, she's really a matriarch of my family, and she died a few years ago, and she was an incredibly faithful woman, and she was always sharp as a tack, and raised six kids, and was just, ran a really tight ship. But she was also warm and fun, and anyway, she died at an old age of 93, which is a blessing, but she had dementia for a number of years in her kind of final part of life. And there was a part of me that was really mad that in the final years of her life, I wanted to really visit with her and hear these stories and know more of this person that I've loved my whole life. But those stories were kind of taken away. She wasn't able to recall them. And when she would talk, she sometimes would sit there with her hands on her lap, and she had really gnarled fingers from arthritis, and she had these crazy varicose veins, and I always thought her hands were really beautiful because they told an exquisite story of a long life. And so for me, these hands kind of clasping one another is more of an embrace than anything. It was a moment to remember fondly, not only a woman that I have loved, but a kind of a generation, a family that was birthed around and through those hands, and the way that they were able to rear kids and, like I said, run a tight ship, make a lot of meals, and also facilitate a really engaged spiritual life and be a faithful wife and mom and grandmother. So there's a lot of life in those hands to me, instead of life being taken away through a disease like dementia. I felt like it was a way of saying, actually, life was really given through those hands. And so it was a way similar to this offering of a host, of a moment that God has blessed and embodied. I actually felt like in some way these elderly hands, which might not offer much to society, were really meaningful, and God had blessed those in their own type of profound way for the use of a family, or there's just a lot of stories that have been kind of stored up in there over time. So I wanted to give those a chance to shine and have some dignity.
That's great. Yeah, it sounds like creating things, creating art, is a way that you can reframe where people put their focus on and bring to attention what are the moments where love shines through, even in really dark situations.
Yeah, I really love that. I've been recently doing some portraits, and I've continued to kind of focus on my family as I've been kind of dusting off the cobwebs of oil painting. The background I've been playing with these kind of vivid hues that have been sometimes complementary in color, but the idea, I think, is to kind of radiate. It looks almost like a bit like kind of a graphic design. It's got this graphic element to it, so it's not hyper realistic, but these colors and kind of the way the composition of the actual like person interplays with this background, it's meant to kind of create this larger than life moments where you can see a person, but you also can recognize that there's more to them that's kind of shining through. So I think there is this, it's maybe similar to this piece or similar to these conversations. It's wanting to create moments of dignity for individuals and have that be seen and recognized, but also like fun and play, and through vivid color and light.
That's great. That sounds fabulous.